Welcome to a very special episode of Nerdin' Out.
Yes, hello. We may sound very low energy, but this is it's a very solemn, somber, yes, episode of Nerdin' Out.
That's Evan. I'm Nathaniel, and we're joined by David as well.
Yeah.
Hello.
Joined by, I've been a guest for the longest time.
You will be forever a guest.
It's like he's always a guest. He will never feel welcome.
No, but
since he's the guest, he always gets to pick where to eat for dinner. Since he's the guest,
Really?
Yeah, that's usually how it works in my house.
No, not in my house.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
My dad is Irish and Native American. If you don't have his way, you go. You never come back.
Well, really? Huh.
He's just like we're taking you
I'm
here.
not gonna go that route. But
I was gonna say
so-
my house is just a lot more generous, I guess. All right.
yeah, I have like a very like hospitality type thing that my parents kind of instituted. Where it's like, no, you're the guest. You're like get everything. You're like special.
Yeah.
So
All right, anyway.
get your family in order. No, I'm just kidding. So
my family
so
in
we're
order.
recording this the day after news broke that Stan Lee has passed away.
Yes,
at 95 years old.
Yep. Now, I want to get this out of the way because you might have heard some rumors about him, which I want to get these out of the way real quick. But I just saw some tweets today, and like at the recording, the day of recording this, that really got me frustrated. And it was that a lot of people accusing Stan Lee of being a sexist, racist bigot, and a lot of different tweets about it. And
Why?
they got me really frustrated. And all I did was revert them to Stan's soapbox, which literally all he does is talk about how the way to defeat sexist and racism and stuff like that is with love and compassion. So I don't understand what they're looking at to get those ideas, but just to try to smear this man's legacy. I think that is disgusting, and I want to get that out there right now. And if you are someone that did that, or if you know someone that did that, that is not okay. And
shame on you.
I'm not I do not condone that at all.
Yeah.
And you should be ashamed of yourself.
Because like I feel like most of the time when we have someone pass away, either they're over glorified or they're usually over glorified, and they get way too much praise. And I understand that someone passes away and it's a big deal, but I think this is, at least for me, it's one of the few deaths, like celebrity deaths, that's really like impactful for me.
Yeah.
And not just for me, but millions of people. Like this guy. So for those of you who somehow clicked on this and don't know who Stan Lee is, he is probably Marvel. I mean, he is Marvel's like most prolific creator. He was a writer. He co-created Spider-Man, Thor, Black Panther, Captain America, right?
Yeah.
The
Iron
Avengers.
Man. Yeah.
Right. That was his
Ant-Man,
idea.
Daredevil, Doctor Strange.
The list goes on and on.
The list goes on.
But
Fantastic Four is just
but the crazy part about it is that he, at this point, like he was the face of Marvel. It wasn't the characters that were the face. He was the face of Marvel, and
he was kind of their unofficial like spokesman almost.
Yeah. He really was. Kevin Feige might have been the president. It might have been the CEO of Marvel, but Stan Lee was the man. He was the guy.
I think which is not always the case for a lot of people. He was at a point in his life where more people than ever, I think, knew who he was.
Yeah.
It was just an insane amount. And part of that is because he has cameos in so many Marvel movies. But
Right. And the thing is, what's great about it is that people who didn't know who he was, who weren't like big Marvel fans going into it, they would see this guy in all these movies and get curious and be like, who is this guy? And then they learn so much about him, and then he gets so much more appreciation for this, and he's not just this old guy that makes cameos in all these movies as different things. One is a bus driver, one is just a guy who's gardening his lawn, and so I think it's
I love the fact
Strip
that
club announcer.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you take such an important person and put him in such non-important like cameo roles. It's
It's
just
a real juxtaposition.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
great. It's really ironic and just
Yeah.
But that's his style.
I think I heard a theory, and if this channel hasn't done anything, it has pumped out a bunch of different theories about a bunch of different things. But I heard a theory that Stan Lee, his character in all these different Marvel movies, he was a watcher.
Oh, right. I've actually heard that, and
Heard of
I
that?
really like that theory.
And I think that's very fitting. He is this entity that is watching over all of these characters in all these different realms and all these different times, and I think that's so appropriate.
But he
because-
doesn't like actually.
But he doesn't do anything.
Right, he doesn't interfere with like where the characters are now,
No.
like in the movies and stuff. He's just kind of, like you said, like watching, and that's
He's
that
there.
is a character in the Marvel universe that is literally that.
And what I think is super appropriate about that, and about him about his cameos in those movies, is that he was a guy who created these characters, to bring joy to people, right? And to tell human stories, but then he let the characters do that for him, themselves. Like which as a watcher, quote unquote, as a theory, he observed these these characters, these human beings,
Just kinda grow
different,
up.
in different walks of life. And it was really weird. I was talking to my friend Matt about this earlier today. When I heard about that, I didn't realize that he was that old. I didn't realize he was 95.
He certainly didn't act that age.
No,
He has more energy than most like 20-something.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I don't think he's 95. I don't think I ever saw him like in a wheelchair or in a walker. He, he's so like youthful and so like, he really felt like a superhero almost. And in my head, I think I just assumed like he would just live forever. I didn't think he would ever die. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I thought he
It's just Stanley, and he's just around.
he is this. He is one of the watchers. He's just this entity that is just always there.
Yeah.
And he's just yeah.
Yeah, I knew he was really up there in age. 95 is like
That
probably longer than most of us will ever live.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the last few years, I guess I was like kind of worried about him passing away at any moment, just because once you get to your 90s, it's just like any moment
Yeah. Yeah.
death could take you. But
I know for anyone it doesn't.
it's still, even though he got to live such an amazing life and impacted people so positively, it's still rough to have him go, because he was so impactful in so many lives, especially I mean, not especially, but he was really impactful in my life, not just for podcast sake, but like I looked up to this guy in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, I can remember when I was younger, when I was like in middle school, I became really attracted to like drawing and more specifically the idea of comic books and creating my own characters and stories. And I remember, do you guys remember, well, I was gonna say you probably don't because you were homeschooled, but
I was homeschooled too.
oh, you were? Oh, well then, anyway, there were these book fairs at public school, where you would go and there'd be a bunch of different books that you can.
Why do you assume we don't know this?
Yeah.
I went to those.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you guys did. Sorry. But there was
What a William thing to do. No, I'm just kidding.
but there was a book there that was by Stan Lee, and it had his big old face on it with his smile and the glasses and it was a book about how to make comic books. And like how to make characters. And I remember getting that, and I was so excited, and I went home, and and the book taught me everything about just like, and what was great about it was that he didn't have like a very strict way of being creative. He really wanted people to explore their imagination, and with that, like, I didn't make superheroes, I made characters, like out of nothing, out of my head. Like I remember, like my main character that I came up with was literally just a ball with feet. He looked like Kirby almost, but he had hair, and he he was this different character. But if anything, he taught me how to tell like human stories, and I think he did the best job of making characters that felt human, that were on a page,
I think that was the biggest thing that impacted me from his characters and just his writing style in general, was that Well, first off, it was the fact that he made relatable, like human characters. They had flaws. They had struggles that we went through. Like Peter Parker had to deal with like school, and he had to like go to college eventually. And his grandma, he had to like deal with her, and just like his aunt. My bad.
I was gonna say,
grandma age.
Let's get that right.
Yeah, Aunt May. My bad. But they had these real human issues they dealt with apart from their superhero lives, and it trickled into their superhero lives. And I think that's what impacted me so much, was the fact that I could connect with these heroes, no matter like where they came from. They still dealt with stuff I dealt with, and they were just really real. They seemed like people to me. And the second thing I think, and he on Stan's soapbox, he even talks about it, how he thinks, like according to him, every story needs to have a message, no matter how subliminal, how small. It has to have some message of value. And I remember growing up, I found that so difficult to do. I was like, no, I just want to write a story that's just a story. But I think the most meaningful stories are the stories that are meaningful. And I think those the like human characters, human three-dimensional characters, and meaningful stories are the two biggest things I took away from just kind of his creation and his style that I hold in very high regard. I think those two are very important to making a great story. And I think he is probably one of the, even though he was comic books, he was probably one of the most influential people in that like space, like for those two story like characteristics or whatever you want to call them. David, you got any thoughts?
It's just still hard to believe that he's gone, and I think he's kind of one of those figures where he was a guy who wrote about fictional heroes, but he was a non-fiction hero. He was the guy who kind of plotted the way for a lot of people to get their foot into comic books, and a lot of what he did was, in a way, just kind of brought us to where we are today. And I like what you said, how he made it relatable, and in a way, he made real people when he wrote, the characters of Iron Man and Captain America and all of these. He made them real people, and you can just look at any Comic-Con. More people dress up about, his characters that he's developed than they would about, any real person.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what, what I had, respect for him. He plotted his, he put his mind onto a piece of paper and sent it out regardless of what people thought of it. And it took some time for him to get as famous as he is, and he had a lot of struggles along the way. But you know what? It's one of those characters in time where he's practically the Walt Disney of comic books.
Yeah.
He he's done something that no one else can ever repeat or attempt to repeat, and the franchise and him have impacted, more than just a media standpoint. They've impacted people. Like, it's so cool to see how, you'd think that something as remedial as a bunch of, lines in color on a piece of paper in a little booklet would be celebrated by millions everywhere and have so much media coverage and everyone paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Paying billions at a box office to see an adaptation of it with, these fictitious characters that are just over the top and,
Doing
fun to watch.
impossible things.
And it's hard to think that all of this is created by one guy. And it's like, you almost have to, like, revel in the fact that he's able to do all of this. And, if I try to come up with, like, a story, I stumble and, like, it's amazing what he's been able to create. All in his own, all in his own regard, just to do it. And before he even realized it was going to be what it is now.
Yeah.
And
I think it was amazing, even up to when he passed away. Like, he was still working. Like,
yeah,
he'd always be doing collaborations with people. Like you said, he was always there behind people, kind of propping them up and helping them along the ways. And I think one of the big ways he did that was through collaboration. He had like a lot of projects, even like a few years ago, and I don't know how recent, maybe even this year, but I remember there'd be like, he'd be the writer on this thing and like on this Japanese comic and like this other thing, and it's just like he's always doing these things. And his role as a producer, and just, I think he's one of the few celebrities that have passed away recently that have just been overly positive and
Yeah.
just like gives you that warm feeling. It is just so genuine and just brings hope, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned before his Stanley soapbox. It's a small little excerpt. You can go look it up. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not
there's.
that long.
I think he used to have them like in their comics, just like randomly in there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he had one that he talked about. He talked about story writing, and a lot of people write stories or they look for stories as an escape. But he said that the way that he wanted to write stories was he didn't want it to be merely an escape. He wanted there to be, a moral lesson. Like he wanted people to grow from it. And he said, a story without a lesson is almost pointless.
It's like a man with no soul.
Yeah. And I can definitely say, I learned, a lot of the themes and a lot of the lessons in the stories that he created with the characters that he had a hand in creating. A lot of them can be, the same message, but they're all powerful messages. Like don't give up, and just because you're a kid or just because you're this certain type of person doesn't mean that you can't do something.
Yeah.
And
like fight for others, protect other people.
Yeah.
Who can't protect themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the first lessons that he taught me was, if you have the power to do something, but then you don't do it, you're responsible for what happens. With great power comes great responsibility. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if you have the ability to do something, you owe it to people to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that holds true in a lot of areas in a lot of people's lives, because I think a lot of people can be very, passive with certain things. But I think if people go out of their way to serve one another, I think that can really help the world. I think because it'll show selflessness, it'll show compassion and patience, but
Yeah, and I think if I can interrupt, like a lot of the like every single hero I feel like he created had just like that desire to do the right thing. I guess you
Right.
could put it that way.
yeah.
They all wanted to help other people. They weren't perfect characters. but
No,
none
no,
of
they
them
were flawed.
probably-
A lot of
right.
them were flawed.
Like-
What was crazy is that a lot of them,
Like even Captain America was flawed.
yeah, Captain America was flawed. Like, and
Everyone except Deadpool.
Who he didn't create. So
he didn't create Deadpool, but
He laid way for him, but
but I think, well, no, and I mean, I was gonna say, like, Ant-Man, there was domestic abuse. Iron Man, there was like
a lot of stuff.
there was drunkenness. There was, I was gonna say, there was incest. I think at some point it was, they're not like perfect characters. But the thing is, though, like he tackles like real life human issues, and he shows like heroes aren't these untouchable people, and that they can, so it kind of shows that like even the elite aren't like perfect. They have issues, they have flaws.
yeah, and I would look at that, and I would always get the message: anyone can be a hero. Like it doesn't matter
Right.
who you are, you can be a hero. Like, and a lot of times these heroes will get their powers out of nowhere, and it kind of did show that. Again, with great power comes great responsibility. If you suddenly have that capacity to do good, you should do it, even if it's hard, even if you lose people, or if things don't go the way you wanted it to. If you could help people, that's what you should do, because it makes the world a better place.
Right.
And the world isn't like, it's not just you, because usually it's the villains in his stories that use their powers for personal gain.
Right.
And it's kind of like he like does have those a lot of times archetypes with his characters, villains,
Yeah.
and heroes and all that. But
What's
I think it's
great-
because it was about that message that he wanted so strongly to emphasize.
Yeah. What's great is he has some villains that like turn good, because then they see
Yeah.
that doing things like being selfish and using their powers for their own means aren't getting them anywhere. So you see that happen with some villains sometimes, and that they even turn around. I mean, the biggest one for me is Venom. Like he was supposed to be like this big terrible, evil thing, and even he, becomes good and realizes that, oh, like me doing this, doesn't
add up to good.
No. Like the ends don't justify the means, like two wrongs don't make a right. So I think that was, just like the little things like that. When was the first time you guys were ever introduced to Stan Lee? Because for me, it was the first time I ever heard his voice. The first time I ever knew of the name Stan Lee was from the Spider-Man PlayStation game. That was the first time I ever heard.
Like the first PlayStation?
Yeah, the first time I ever heard it was like Spider-Man 2000 or whatever. And the very first level of the game, it's Stan Lee, narrating, saying like, "Hey, it's me, Stan Lee," and saying like, "It looks like Spider-Man's gotten himself into a heap of trouble." And it's like, that's the first time I ever heard his name. Every time I loaded up the game, I would hear his voice. So then next time when I saw his book, I'm like, "Oh, that's Stan Lee. He made Spider-Man. That's really cool." And then I learned, and then that's kind of got me into like
the rest of it.
Yeah, and then the rest is history, really.
I think mine was just ironically through seeing him in the movie and be like, okay, who is this guy?
Wow, really?
And then after a little while, I've heard it. I heard people say, "Oh, it's Stan Lee." He's like, he wrote the characters. Like, that's cool. They got the guy who wrote him in being in the movie, and then it was just like, okay, who is he? Like,
Right.
Because you see him in all these movies, like, all right, well, he must be important. And then you go and you Google him and you Wikipedia him and you see all that he's done in his life, and you're just like, oh. You'd think like, oh, they're doing him a favor by having him in the movie. No. He's doing them a favor being in that movie.
One of my favorite quotes from him is he showed up to the Infinity War movie, to the premiere, and this lady was like, "Oh, like what do you think about all the movies?" It's like, "I think it's really nice that people are coming to see my movies with everyone else in it."
Yeah. That's that's the best depiction of him. He's sharp. He is very sharp. Even even today, like Nathaniel said, he didn't even like slow down. He just kept working. And
Yeah, like few people, almost no people at that age are that energetic. I remember it was like 3 or 4 years ago at Comic-Con. It's probably closer to 5 now. So it was still like 90. They were releasing a Spider-Man game that turned out to not be very good. I forget what it was called, but
probably like Amazing Spider-Man 2.
It was like an Activision game or something.
Yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 2.
No, it wasn't that one. It was
Really?
like this. It was weird. Anyway, Stan Lee made a guest appearance. Like nobody was expecting him, so there wasn't like a huge crowd of people because this game wasn't like super hyped. He just shows up at the panel and starts talking about Spider-Man and about different stuff. And like I remember everyone was just insane for just that he was there. Everyone was just yelling and just so excited. And when he made his exit, there was like a few, probably like I want to say around 10 steps that went down and like some guardrails, and he pretty briskly like walked up to them and then just put his hand on the guardrails and then just jumped down all the stairs. And all the guards who were around him were just like, no, he's gonna break. But he was just like waving and just like nothing happened. And I was like, dude, slow down, but don't, because it's amazing. But oh my gosh,
dude's a beast.
Yeah, he was just he brought such an energy to the room just by being there. And I'm just like, dude, I'm like 20 something and I can't even get out of bed sometimes. Like, give me some of that energy.
Yeah, man. Oh my gosh.
But I think in terms of his legacy, like most of our entertainment, like most of the most popular entertainment, not like most entertainment, a lot of what we consume and makes the most money is stuff that Stan Lee had a hand in.
Yeah.
Like characters that he originally created.
Yeah.
Like if you think about like one of the biggest movies of this year was Avengers Infinity War.
Right.
Yeah.
He created the Avengers. Like in a lot of the original Avengers, like they were characters he created. And
I was gonna say, I think you can go through the roster, and I think he created or had a hand in creating at least like 80% of the characters in that movie. Because like as you said before, like he created Black Panther, he created Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man,
Thor,
Hulk.
So basically,
that's like the main core of Avengers.
Ant-Man,
right there.
who wasn't in
You
it.
missed Black Widow.
Black Widow, my bad.
Did he create Black Widow?
I don't know. Did he?
I imagine he.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And Captain Marvel, who was just coming out.
Who's
next year,
coming
but
out? Yeah.
some of our most anticipated just entertainment releases are,
Have his fingerprints on it.
yeah, like Daredevil season 3. One of the biggest Netflix shows just came out, and he
Yeah.
created Daredevil.
Of course he did.
Yeah, Spider-Man for PlayStation, one of the biggest video game releases this year.
Yeah, and
Based on-
he has a cameo in it.
Yeah, he even has like they literally sculpted him into the game.
He looks really good in it too. But
So I think it's undeniable like what a mark this guy has left. Like
right,
he's everywhere.
yeah,
And a lot of people don't even still a lot of people don't realize it.
right, yeah, yeah.
It's hard to even like think that he's like. I know it's a cliche being like, it's hard to think that he's gone, but it is, and in a way he isn't, because everything that he's done is living on through what he's created in this universe, and it will continue living on. But at the same time, you almost don't want to look forward to when he won't be cameoing in his own movies and his
Yeah.
It's sad to think that the guy who has brought so much attention to this small niche that used to be comic book nerds and
Right.
video game nerds has now completely flipped it upside down, and now it's a niche to not be a comic book video game,
Right.
Marvel, DC, even on the side of what he has not created, just the hand that he had in just bringing a light to the people that were once just like considered lowly people that like
Or
reading
outcasts.
comic books, outcasts and people who they're not realistic and they don't have it's so hard to think that he's not going to be there anymore, but I guess in a way he's kind of left something behind for us to thank and
Yeah.
remember him by and appreciate what he's done so far. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Dude.
I can honestly say my life wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for him.
yeah.
Like, I think the first time I knew about Stanley, I was like maybe like 13. Like, so my dad used to go to Comic-Con all the time, like before I ever went, and he would bring back like magazines and the like program for Comic-Con, and I'd see him in there all the time. And eventually, I connected the dots, and I was like, oh, this guy like he created some of these superheroes, or he like had a hand in some of them. And then I remember they were doing like a rerun in one of the newspapers that we actually got to our house.
Whoa.
Yeah, and
Paper? What's paper?
they were reprinting the original Spider-Man comics. So I went
Oh,
through like
yeah.
the first 100 of them or so, and despite their like cheesiness, like they were still great. I mean, yeah, they were great. They were-
Freaking nerd. No, I'm kidding. I can't say that. I literally got a subscription where I got a comic book,
Nice.
one of the original comic books, like a reprint of them, like every other week or something like that. So I had a bunch of those Spider-Man comics. I can't do that, man. That's man.
Yeah, and like not every character that he made was a hit. Like he had Taskmaster and Chameleon, who were just like, okay, but he had the amount of characters that people like even mistake him for creating.
Well, the thing is, though, the amount of like original characters, I think that's the crazy part.
Yeah.
I don't think people appreciate that enough. Like a lot of people would say, like, oh well, Iron Man is just a different
Batman with an iron suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like Captain Marvel is like a female version of Superman, kind of, which I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, all right, but
Green Lantern is Doctor Strange, but without the green color scheme.
That's a
nah,
stretch.
Like,
that's
what?
a stretch. That's a stretch.
Yeah.
Mr. Fantastic is Plastic Man.
Yeah.
Which,
Plastic
eh.
Man is an abomination, but
yeah. Well, DC is an abomination, but we're not here for that.
Wow.
we're not gonna hate on DC. He even worked for DC, so
Yeah.
he
Which is true.
wrote some stuff for them.
Yeah, but the moment he left, they started sucking. So that's not a coincidence.
But I think if we just, without like hating on DC too much, like going just a
Yeah.
little bit into that, like he worked on both of these companies, and I think Stanley was a big difference between what Marvel had and DC didn't have.
Right.
And I think it was that humanness. Like I could not connect. I've never been able to connect with Superman, and I know he's supposed to be more of like an ideal, like thing to strive for. but
Like,
he
I get-
didn't have like
yeah.
that humanness.
I get the idea that he is alien, and he's
Right.
not human, and that's why probably you're not supposed to.
And he's supposed to be more of like this almost like deity that you look up to and strive for, but it just didn't do it for me. Like I just could not
But
connect.
when you have a character that stands for truth, justice, in the American way, but you can't relate to him on a human American level,
And that's what I
then-
felt that Stan's characters did different, and that's
Yeah.
why I really gravitated
What
towards
was,
Marvel.
yeah, what was crazy is Captain America. Like he wasn't even like for America all the time. Like he he didn't even think America was doing it right the whole time. And there was like conflict. There was like loyalty issues within that, and like
Yeah.
there was like characters had identity crisis, and it wasn't about like I am a superhero and that's all my life is. Like the best stories are when the superheroes like superhero life and their personal lives intertwine, and he told those stories the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like. I haven't really read the comics, but from what I know of the show of Daredevil, and like from what I've read in other places, Daredevil I think is one of the best examples. Just it's kind of like, I guess, similar to Batman, where he kind of needs his superhero persona, but there's also like a conflict because it hurts him. Like this character is very damaging to himself.
Right.
It helps others, like Daredevil helps others and makes the world almost like kind of a better place in type of a cliche type of way, but he like him in his life, like Matt Murdock pushes away his friends, and like his whole life as Matt Murdock is kind of destroyed because of this superhero. So that's just one example of one of his heroes that's like his heroes basically are not copy and paste. They're
No.
like all very different despite sharing these common themes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And again, and like one important thing to realize for people who don't know is like he didn't actually draw these characters. He was a writer.
No. He was
Yeah.
a writer primarily.
Yeah, but he like had descriptions of.
Right.
I remember I read something where he said, because he credited the artists a lot. Like he said, I had these descriptions of what they were supposed to look like, and every time I had an artist work with me and draw them, I was blown away. It's like that's way better than anything I could have imagined. He's like, I could have come up with that. That's way better. But
And I think that's awesome. Like he didn't try to take credit for like full credit for anything. Like he gave credit where it was due, which I think is like not something you see a lot, because a lot of people credit him as the creator of these characters. But the thing is, though, the way that they look and the way that they stick out in our heads, that wasn't him.
Right.
He created like the humanness and the stories of these characters, but when it came to the aesthetic, like he credited other, like all the artists that came before him and all the artists that he worked with, and made sure that they were known, and then they got their credit and they got work other places. So like he really did a lot to help other people.
like Jack Kirby was one of the biggest ones
Yeah.
that he
Oh,
worked
yeah.
with. What was the one with Spider-Man, Steve Ditko?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And he just worked with so many different artists, but
So I thought we can go like this last part. We could just go into thinking just like final thoughts or any anything. If you had a chance to talk to Stan Lee, what questions would you have for him?
Wouldn't have enough questions. How? I don't. Okay, I have a question. I have a question for him. It would be, what kept you going? What kept you wanting to create these characters? What kept you on, engaged in what you were doing? Because I feel like so many people, they have an idea and they flesh it out, and then they don't follow through. They don't have the passion for it, and it just
Right.
seems like he was just a driven guy. Like I'd love to know, what was it that kept him grounded? What was it that, I'm sure there's an interview somewhere where he answers it, but I'd just like to hear it from him. Like what
Right.
kept you so involved in the characters you created?
yeah, because he didn't get like famous until later in life too.
Yeah.
Like he didn't create Spider-Man until he was like 39.
Right.
and he had other superheroes that didn't do too well. And I remember, I think the Fantastic Four didn't start off like too great. He wanted them to do really well, but it took him a few tries before they kind of caught on a little bit more. But Spider-Man was like his first big character, and he was 39 years old when he co-created him. So yeah, like what kept him going, I don't know, but because at the beginning he didn't have kind of that fan base,
Yeah.
kind of that motivation to keep him going.
Shoot,
But-
39. Let's see. He was 95. So, shoot, that was 60 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
middle of the 1950s, comic books were like barely a thing.
Right.
I mean, I would love to find out what is it that made you still just keep creating.
Yeah. And
But-
I can't answer that for him, but I feel like he really believed in these characters.
Oh, yeah.
Like he
I mean, you feel it. You felt
Yeah.
it though. You felt like he did.
hmm And I think it was part of that, having real relatable characters and having those stories that mattered.
Right.
Like he really wanted these stories to be told. He wanted to get his message across.
Yeah.
If I could ask him something, I mean, again, it would be like a lot of things. I would have loved to have the opportunity just to have a chat with him. Like not necessarily ask him about like comic book stuff, but just
Just
kind
like
of
talk to him about life.
talk to him as a person.
Yeah.
Because obviously I never got to do that, but that would have been, I think, really cool.
Yeah.
Just kind of have a chat with the guy and see what he's like underneath what.
Your question? Yanni or Laurel? What?
Oh,
never mind,
my
Stan. Never mind.
Oh my
Never
goodness,
mind.
David.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about, you darn kid?
The dress is black and blue.
It's red and black like Spider-Man.
Your hair is Spider-Man.
Pulls out comic book.
How about you, Evan? Like,
Oh man, I know I asked that question, but I don't. I think I would just thank him,
yeah.
just for kind of like combining both, like of your guys' statements, like of being a real person, but also just like not giving up. I think, because the thing is though, there's no way you can know what impact you'll have on people's lives, before you get to the end of your life. You know what I mean? I don't think he realized, maybe he said like 60 years ago, that he would have the kind of impact on people's lives that he did. And
people's careers have been made because of his characters.
yeah,
And like,
yeah, and I think, and the thing is though, I think, and I know it's a small thing. I think people can consider it a small thing, like reading comic books and going through these stories. I know people can consider that like a very small thing, but I can think of times when I was a very low place, and reading his comic books or reading stories, and they helped me get through a lot of hard things. And I know it's like, really, Evan, really, it's so cliche, but I mean, when you read stories about characters that have to overcome adversity and are led to do the right thing because they know it's right and not because they'll get something out of it. When you read stories about characters with integrity and just the idea that anyone can be a hero at any point, I think that that was just inspiring.
yeah, I don't think it's a small thing at all. Like, I
Right.
think even Stan knew that. I think it took him a while to realize that. Again, in one of his soapboxes, like one of those little
Right. Little panels.
blurbs, he talked about how he was like, he like felt subconscious about writing comic books. He's like, I write comic books for a living, and other people are like doing medicine and building bridges. And then he kind of realized that what he did was just as important.
Right.
Without this art, entertainment, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
people don't have a reason to live. Like, this brings people meaning, is one of the things that like makes people want to keep going. And it just, with that creativity and that outlet, and whether you consume or create, like, it's one of the things that makes us human.
Yeah, and I think he recognized. I think you kind of hit it on the head. I think he recognized that if he has the platform to make a difference, and if he has the platform to tell stories that could, with a message that could actually affect someone in a positive way, then he has the responsibility to. I think with great power comes great responsibility. Really, kind of came from his own experiences, because he recognized the fact that he had a responsibility, and even doing something as not as important, quote unquote, as making comic books. The idea that he couldn't make an impact was not, I don't think, was even in his realm of thought.
Right.
Because I think he recognized the fact that even if he's able to reach the heart of one person, I think he thought in his mind that would be enough. So,
I mean, the fact that all three of us have been affected by him, like, just happen to be all three people on a nerd podcast about superheroes. No, but all three of us have been like pretty affected. Like, I can say, I mean, you can tell by hearing us, like, and that there are millions of people like us, probably even way more deeply affected.
right.
I mean, some people dedicate their entire careers to like one character, like Spider-Man, and that's all they do, or they go through a few characters, but like, people get fed because of his characters. Like, you have whole people employed in like making a movie like Infinity War because this guy wrote some stuff down on a piece of paper.
I was going to say, Insomniac Spider-Man, there was a whole team of people that
Working
got
on it for
hired,
years.
working on it for years, and they got fed, like, people's families got fed because of that, because of projects like that, because he created a product that people wanted.
And that's like a whole nother side to it. But I think, I don't think I'd be the same person without him. Like, my creative tendencies, what I consume, none of it would be the same. And like you said, Evan, some dark times that I went through, I think his characters, they really helped me through it. I was able to connect with them and think, if they can do it, so can I. Or if I didn't think I could do it, I was just really inspired by these characters. And I didn't read too many comic books growing up because I didn't have the money for it. But every time I got a hold of a comic book, it just happened to be a character written by Stan. And I looked forward so much to anytime I could get a hold of one of the comics and read through it. It wasn't enough. I just wanted more. And it was just great. Like, he has a legacy like almost no people in any field have.
No.
And it's just,
No one can follow him up, and no one can replace him.
no, like, in his,
no way.
no, he's an icon.
Yeah.
And he will be sorely missed.
Absolutely.
And we'll keep celebrating him every year through
Absolutely.
the inevitable like new Avengers film and Spider-Man game, and just all the
future movies that are going to come out, without him now.
he's still going to be well loved and remembered, and I think that's something not many people can say.
Yeah. We'll miss you, Stan.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much. So thanks for joining us on this very special episode of Nerdin' Out. Maybe share your stories with us of what Stan Lee meant to you, and your favorite just characters, and just how he touched your life. So follow us
on Twitter and on Facebook under Nerdin' Out. We also have an email, nerdinoutpodcast@gmail.com.
this time in the subject line, write Stan Lee. And we hope to catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Wait. Excelsior.